Welcome back to
Are we
the
live?
SNS podcast.
Oh, yeah, we are
We're
live.
live. Yeah, I think the little red thing means we're live.
Yeah. Well, the counter's going. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, we're live. We're back. I apologize. We've missed like the last 2 weeks, sort of. I was on vacation. A couple of the other guys were busy, so we're gonna try to make sure the pod's up every week, especially before the majority of the games are played, so we can get our bets in and have them on camera. Because when I give you guys the podcast record so far against the spread, we're kind of smashing it. But if we don't have it on camera, then people could just say we could write any number in that we wanted, which is true. So
Yeah, our record is so good right now that
it looks
it's
fake.
not. Yeah, it sounds fake.
Actually, when you told me, I thought it was wrong. I was like, I don't think that's right. But we'll get to that later in the podcast here. Basically, where we left off in the pod, we were discussing week 2. There's a lot of big games that weekend. OSU, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Georgia, Stanford, USC, and and then there was another one, Auburn, Clemson. So we previewed those games. We gave our predictions and such. And the last couple of weeks we've started to kind of figure out which teams might be for real, which teams might be pretenders, basically. I think that there's still a lot of season left, but you can kind of tell which teams are probably like playoff contenders at this point. It doesn't mean that teams that we don't talk about might not be contenders. I mean, the first winner the winner of the first college football playoff was Ohio State, and they were 16th in the playoff rankings when the first official rankings came out. So if you're a team that's kind of in the teens right now, if you're, let's say, Oregon, who, like, spoiler, could be like a surprise team we talk about that's ranked, I think, 23rd in the AP right now, you're not out of it. If you play a lot of ranked teams on your schedule coming up, then you've got a chance to get back in it. So I guess we can do like a quick just kind of like top 5 right now. Who do we think are like the 5 best programs at this point, like the teams that obviously have the best chance to make the playoff? I'll let you go, and then I'm sure mine are probably pretty similar. But.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about number 1 on the way here. I went back and forth actually between Alabama and Clemson. I think everyone has those as the top 2 teams right now. At first, I thought I was going to say Clemson just because Kelly Bryant, quarterback was the biggest question for them, and Kelly Bryant's been more than adequate. He's been really good so far. So it looks like they'll be fine at quarterback. But I was just thinking about that championship game. They don't win that game without Watson.
Oh,
so
no,
yeah, just because of that, I'm going to give Alabama the edge at number 1 in my poll right now. So Clemson's obviously number 2. Number 3 is Oklahoma, and I give them the edge over Penn State right now, really because Penn State just hasn't played anyone yet. They haven't been tested.
Which they might get kind of tested this weekend. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But,
so Oklahoma 3, Penn State 4, and then after that I kind of see a big drop-off just because I'm going to put USC in here by default at number 5. I don't think they've played really well. They beat a Stanford team that has been a disappointment so far.
Mm-hmm.
Same deal with Texas. I mean, I don't think they should have gone to OT. Like, they should have lost to Texas, honestly.
Yeah.
Is a team I don't think they should be going to OT with if they, want to be a national championship type of team.
Right.
So and even the first game of the season, they struggled a little bit. So, I mean, they're still undefeated. They still have a lot of talent and a lot of potential. I mean, like we said, there's a lot of season left to get things to where they need to be.
Sure.
So I'll just say they're the 5th best team.
Some surprise teams, maybe teams that are, let's say, like maybe outside the top 10, I guess. Like teams that are maybe lurking in the teens and 20s that you feel like could make a run and get into the playoff.
Yeah. Where's Auburn at right now? They got to be in like that range.
They're up there. They're like I think like 19 maybe.
Yeah. I would put Auburn in there. I mean, they had a close game with Clemson on the road. That's obviously going to be really tough.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon, further down, was a team that I said before the season that I liked, and they look pretty good so far. Other teams, even further down, like not unranked teams that have been surprising. Definitely, I would include Purdue in there just because of how bad Purdue has been the last like 5 years.
It's been awful.
Yeah, not even worthy of being called a Power 5 team. But this year, I mean, they're actually competitive. They I'm surprised at how quickly. I mean, it's still early, but how quickly it looks like Brahms turned things around. I mean, this is a team that they've got 2 blowout wins and a close loss against Louisville. If you just take the same team last year, I mean, basically the same players, they quite possibly go 0-3 in those games and get smoked by Louisville.
Yeah.
So,
it's amazing what a coach can do for a program.
Yeah.
It's like the same players. It was Darrell Hazel's players, but Brahm has them. It's actually funny. They were talking about this on the radio today, and I don't really like our local radio guys that much, but they were right about this, where they were talking about Purdue has been much more efficient on defense, and like Brahms like known for the offense.
Yeah.
But that's where Hazel's teams were trash, was on defense.
Yeah.
So that's where they definitely have improved, and that's made them better. Yeah. So those are pretty similar to mine. I think I have Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Penn State, and then I'm actually gonna say. I mean, I could say USC. I'll say, just for the sake of being different, Oklahoma State, which has really surprised me so far. I still have questions about their defense, but I could say the same thing about USC. I've questioned their defense for the last few years and the beginning of this year, but Oklahoma State has a lot of firepower. They've looked really explosive, and if they get any kind of defense at all, just like Penn State, just like USC, they can beat anybody. So I think those teams all have legitimate shots. I think that I agree with Addison that, and if you guys see my cats running around, they're going nuts. I agree that I think Auburn and like Ohio State, those are 2 teams that looked pretty bad in 2 big games in the same week. And people were really quick to write them off. They were saying, they looked really bad on offense, which Ohio State did. Auburn looked really bad on offense against Clemson, but Auburn was playing at Clemson against possibly the nation's best defense. I mean, Clemson's defense has looked overwhelming.
Yeah.
And Lamar Jackson looked overwhelmed that game. I mean, he's a tough guy to contain. So I think some teams that maybe had early losses that, I think a lot of people have like the knee-jerk reaction, and they'll say, well, those teams are out. We learned with Ohio State a few years ago that might not be the case with some teams, and that team was insanely loaded with talent, so it's a little different maybe. But I think those are cool teams to keep your eye on. They still have a lot of ranked teams and really good teams ahead of them as far as the polls go. They play, and they could win those games and get back into it. I definitely agree with Oregon, though. I think that's a team that I still am not sure about their defense, but they've looked explosive again, as they usually do, and who knows in the Pac-12, if they pull off a couple upsets, they're going to be right in the thick of it. I think another team that Corey from Denver, I guess, will be happy for me to say that, again, we might not know a whole lot about them, but they looked pretty good against West Virginia as Virginia Tech. They're ranked 13th right now. I'm not sure that they have that kind of talent that like Auburn or Oregon does. Maybe they do as Oregon. I think they recruit probably similarly to Oregon. But, Virginia Tech, I think they play Clemson next weekend. Is that game day going there or something like that? I mean, if they were to win that game, they're right there. I mean, we're talking about them as like the ACC favorite. So that's another team to watch out for. I do have questions, and I want to see them against Clemson, and then we'll find out more about them. And we'll find out more about these teams as we get into the middle of the season. But right now, those are the teams that I think everyone's in agreement on. That's those are the teams that are probably like your playoff contenders, and then your surprise teams or whatever. So I was surprised the other day to see that Nebraska fired their athletic director. And whenever that usually happens, you kind of have like a lame duck head coach situation. So
and I think I think there was like a quote or something that was like he was fired because of on-field performance. So you got to think that the coach is going to follow.
I mean, yeah, the AD is not the one coaching the team. He picked the coach, so like that's bad, obviously. But
if
Mike Riley sucks.
Let's just call this is something that we've talked about ever since he got hired. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And Nebraska, for the kind of expectations that program at this point in time should have, like Pelini was kind of
good.
the peak, you know, like
and like Frank Solich was good, and they kind of made him leave, and he was
to bring in Callahan, who sucked also,
who was worse than Mike Riley, if there is such a thing as being worse than Mike Riley. Mike Riley here. I'll correct myself. He doesn't suck. He's not trash, I don't think. But we talk about a guy that he was coaching the San Diego Chargers. He coached Oregon State twice, I think, in 2 different stints.
Yeah.
All the teams that he coached at were always mediocre. And that's the same. It makes me think of Kirk Ferentz. We're like, man, Kirk Ferentz, he's this coach that was getting NFL head coaching offers. He's known for getting the best out of his talent. I mean, yeah, Iowa doesn't recruit well, but isn't part of being an elite college coach being able to recruit well? And so, like, I think that's a part of it. Now, if we're talking about just pure X's and O's, motivating your players, then, like, yeah, maybe Ferentz is okay, but these guys are all, like, their programs are always mediocre. And so, like,
Mike Riley is not the coach that Nebraska should, that's...
No.
They don't want to be Oregon State.
No, right, exactly right. So, I mean, I think... As far as like talking about, what Nebraska fans, and I think we talked about this in the Big Ten podcast, that Nebraska fans, you guys, no offense, are delusional. You think that your program you think it's the 80s and the 90s again. And you think that you're supposed to be this blue blood top 5 program, Tommy Frazier, Lawrence Phillips, Jesus, I don't know if I should mention him, but like, I mean, guys that were really good for Nebraska when they were a top 3 program. It's different now. Everybody's on TV. Nebraska was one of like 6 teams on TV in the 80s, okay? You had Nebraska, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Texas. Okay, maybe there's a few more than 6, but literally everybody's on TV now. We're watching Virginia, Boise State right now. Back in the 80s, kids who lived in California, they would have rather been 4th string on USC or been like a backup on UCLA than gone and starred for Boise State, which these kids are all on TV. All the facilities are good because of all the money from the TV contracts. They all can go to the NFL from any school now. I mean, you have Robert Griffin, who won the Heisman for Baylor. Growing up, Baylor was, I thought back in like 1999 on NCAA football game that Baylor was a made-up school, like directional teams that were on that game. So it's different now. And the point is that Nebraska, you guys, you have to have in-state recruiting to, I think, have a big edge over the other schools because everybody's on TV. Like you guys, Nebraska was known for getting kids from California and Texas, if I'm correct. But these kids can stay home in California and Texas and go to the other schools that are all on TV now. And Nebraska can't pull from their state because nobody fucking lives there. So, I mean, do you agree with that? I mean,
I think you can say this about any school, but I think, like, the right coach could, make Nebraska really good.
I agree with that. I think
we've talked a lot about what seems like what probably every Nebraska fan wants is Scott Frost,
right?
Back there as head coach, and I think that'd be really interesting.
Player, he's doing well with UCF. Was Oregon's offensive coordinator for a few years. He's known as a really young, bright mind, and so to kind of not to take over what you were saying, but just to add a quick note, I do think he's 100% right about that. Is any school has the ability to, I think, hit a home run with a coaching hire, but it's going to be tougher for a school like Nebraska just because
Nebraska had, like, their whole history is, like, one head coach.
Right. Yeah. Osborne. That's it. Like, so I don't even know. Wow, these guys are going nuts. So, yeah, I mean, and I think the same can go for, like, if you want to find another comparable school is, like, Notre Dame's kind of in the same boat. I think their fans think they should be, national title contender every year. Notre Dame, with their academic standards, and the fact that they have to battle against Michigan, Ohio State recruiting, and like that's the thing that Notre Dame had going for them back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, is that, if Notre Dame's head coach walked into a kid's living room, everybody knows who Notre Dame is. Notre Dame was on national television. You got the golden helmets. But now it's pretty much an equal playing field for a lot of these teams, and Notre Dame doesn't really pull from in-state recruiting. The whole like national, hey, we're Notre Dame, come play for us. I mean, you could probably list 10 other programs that kids would rather probably play for at this point. And now,
I don't think Notre Dame has a lot of swag.
No, they don't. And like, I do think that they have recruited well under Brian Kelly, and they're probably a step above Nebraska as far as like what they can be. I mean, for God's sakes, they were just in the national title game a few years ago, albeit getting smoked. But I mean, everybody that year got smoked by Alabama. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, I think the point is, that we're trying to make is that you guys who are fans of programs that were really good back in the day, you have to think about why you were good and what edge you had over the competition. It's a lot different playing field nowadays. And so I think Mike Riley's going to be out. I agree with you. I think Scott Frost is going to be in. Hopefully for their sake, that's good. And hopefully he gets them back to where I think, what do you think reasonable expectations for Nebraska would be as a fan? Like, would you be happy with them winning 9 to 10 games every year and then sometimes being like that 11-win team that could win the Big Ten and maybe get into the playoff? I mean, I think that's reasonable.
Pelini had them at a 9-win,
right, and
guaranteed every year pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and then they fired Pelini basically just because they didn't like him. But he was an angry person.
I mean, that's why Harbaugh got fired from the 49ers. I mean, yeah, so they're pretty similar people. He is an angry person. I do like the little like cat.
I like
image.
I like him in bringing out the cat in that one spring game.
Yeah. Hey,
speaking of cats.
Hey, get down. Get down. Can you guys see him up there? Yeah, you can. Charlie. All right, so we'll transition to before we get into the bets. We always do that last. Let's get into some games for this weekend.
Talk about games like pull up some top 25.
Yeah, we'll get some games that we'll preview. We try to do that for each. I'm gonna have to go get my cat in a sec here. I'll let you find a game, just start previewing the first game, and then I'll join it in a sec.
A good nooner tomorrow. We got NC State at Florida State. Florida State, we haven't seen them since week 1, so it's kind of weird. It feels like they haven't even played. And they're breaking in a new quarterback pretty much. I know Blackman got in at the end of the Alabama game because Francois got hurt. But this will be his first start.
He's really skinny.
He looks malnourished.
Yeah, he's like 6'8", 150. Like, seriously.
But I hear a lot of course, I mean, he's at Florida State, so of course he's a big-time recruit. I hear a lot of people talking him up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that guy's a question mark. NC State has a great D-line. I kind of wonder, I know NC State's got a great D-line. It takes more than that. Florida State's got great players at every position.
Yeah. Everywhere.
So, although the one thing is Florida State, their O-line has struggled against good D-lines.
Yeah.
So you never know about that matchup.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this is a potential upset for sure. I think NC State can definitely win this football game just because we don't know about Blackman really. And Florida State, they only have one game under their belt due to the hurricanes that have been coming through, the southeastern part of the country. So, teams like a lot of those teams actually like Miami, who plays Toledo, has only one game under the belt. That's another kind of little interesting game. But I think that we will find out a lot about Florida State in this game and what their offense is going to look like for the rest of the year because they're playing definitely a defense that I think most would probably consider like top 15 or 20 maybe. I'm not 100% sure about the metrics on it, but fuck the metrics anyway. But I think I don't know. This is definitely an interesting game. I think the line, it opened around, I think maybe 10 or 11. It went up to 14, back to 13. That's a lot of points. It's kind of weird that it's that many points. And you're right. I think that maybe that's just a testament to how, talented Florida State really is. And maybe we're getting a little high on NC State. But that's definitely an interesting game. Do you, how about, let's just go based off what the spread is right now. I think it's 13.
Yeah.
Who do you like against the spread in that game, just for the sake of the preview?
It's I mean, this isn't one that I have in my picks.
Right.
I don't know in this one. I could see it going either way.
How about this? I have NC State.
I think Florida. Yeah.
Because I think they could win the game. So I think there's a lot of value in the points.
You like NC State more than me. I think Florida State's going to win.
Okay.
It's less uncertain for me than it is you. So.
How about the unders at 51? That could be like my lock bet of the week. I feel like both these teams are going to play very good defense in this game. I think Blackman's going to struggle a little bit. I think Florida State's athletes will really contain NC State's offense. Would you go under 51, or do you think for some reason that would go over that? Do you think
I'd be more inclined to take the under probably.
Okay. Let's move on to the next game. Do you have one ready to go?
We got a top 25 matchup, TCU at Oklahoma State.
Pokes and TCU. Yep. TCU used to be good on defense, but then they decided, hey, we're in the Big 12 and we're going to suck ass at it. So, I think the spread in that one is now actually 14.
Yeah, 14 is what I've seen.
I think it was 11 or 12. Obviously, people have been betting Oklahoma State hard. They've been the public darling the last few weeks, and
offense
like
is always going to do that.
It's been really good, yeah. To be totally honest, I don't really know a whole lot about TCU yet this year to really say
I haven't seen them play.
who I would pick one way or the other. What I do know about TCU traditionally the last few years is that defensively they've taken a little bit of a step back as far as what they used to be. I also think that I can't really ever trust Kenny Hill playing quarterback, so who knows what we'll see out of him. He could be really good on Saturday or tomorrow. He could be really bad, and Oklahoma State could turn that thing into a rout. I think the over-under that I got it at was 71, and I went over. I think this game could potentially be, it could easily get into the 80s. And that number actually moved a good amount. I don't remember what it opened at, I think.
Like 64, I
think.
think.
Which is...
So it went up a full touchdown.
Really low. So I got it at kind of a bad number, I guess, but I still think there's a lot of wiggle room there potentially. So
I don't think it jumped so quick. I don't think you could have got it.
Yeah, there's no chance. Yeah, like for our means of being able to make bets, I don't think it was possible. So who, I guess 14... Who do you like against the spread in that one then? I know we said we don't really know a lot about TCU.
Yeah,
but...
I would probably go with TCU just because it's 2 full touchdowns here.
Yeah, I think TCU can probably do enough against
the few points. The few points make a difference from it going to from 11.
I agree.
12 up to 14.
It's a key number, and it's a team that is talented, and I think they can keep up. I don't think they're going to win the game.
TCU did get waxed by this team on their home field last year, right. So I don't know.
We'll see. I don't know either. Is that it? Do we have another game that we want to talk about, or
there's some? There's. I think Mississippi State Georgia is worth talking about.
That's an interesting one. Mississippi State. So the first that I got to see of Mississippi State this year was last weekend. I was in Nashville, and I was in this Coyote Ugly bar, which I have a video of that was insanity, and it was really strange. But I was the one guy in the bar that seemed to be paying attention to this little tiny box TV that they had, and it was LSU versus Mississippi State. And I'm watching the game, I'm sitting there thinking, if I didn't know any better, and somebody told me about these two programs and how good they traditionally are, I would have thought the guys in the maroon and white were LSU, the way they were beating the shit out of LSU, Mississippi State, that is. So Nick Fitzgerald, their quarterback for them, has been a solid starter the last 2.5 years, but he's been really good this year. Dan Mullen always seems to, get, I guess we have that old cliche, like the most out of his talent and stuff, and they look good. And we're going to really find out a lot about them this weekend against Georgia. I think Georgia's a solid team, and, Mississippi State has a really brutal stretch here. They have at Georgia, and then they're at Auburn. So I guess the next 2 weeks, we're going to find out a lot about this team. And, somehow...
We'll find out, for sure.
Exactly. If they were to win those 2 games, they're in the playoff picture right away.
It'd be like a few years ago when they had Dak Prescott, and they won a few big games. All of a sudden, they're number 1 in the playoff ranking,
Right. So, this is definitely a team to watch out for. That line, I believe, is at 5 now.
5 right now is what I saw last.
I would be inclined to take a team that I think can definitely win the game and is getting points. For all we know, this could be the better team. Georgia, on paper, probably has more talent, but from what we've seen so far this year, I think this game's more of a flip than the team that's going to. I would
Georgia
take the points.
Pretty one-dimensional, I think. Still,
Fromm's talented, but it's just not quite there yet.
I would actually in my picks I'll mention Mississippi State, but I still like him at 5. It started at 6.5. Is what I saw initially. I would just keep taking the dogs the Maroon Dogs.
Right.
For another week at least. If they win this game, they're if they win this week, I'll probably start,
really believing in them.
Yeah, I'll definitely believe in them, but I'll also probably start selling them from a betting perspective because then everyone's gonna be all over them.
Yeah, for you guys that are, we don't consider ourselves to be pro bettors or anything, even though when we go to tell you our record, Maybe we are.
Maybe we should be.
But I think that's a really good point. Teams will have one really good game, maybe two, and then all of a sudden there's an overreaction with the public and how the lines are set, and then you can start betting against those teams. So I think one of those teams that we can mention real quick is Charlie Strong's South Florida, whatever they are, Bulls. I think if you're like, I think you have to be careful about just like loading up the box score on your phone, or like if you're like 95 and you still read the newspaper, like Steele does, then I think
Steele probably cuts out little sections in
newspaper. Yeah, and he's like, right, he's got like the box scores up and stuff. I think you have to be careful about what I call like being a box score guy. I think the box score is a good indicator of how the game went, but there can be some discrepancies with how close the game really was, like where things went wrong. Like if a quarterback, for example, has a really bad statistical day, that could be because the O-line and wide receivers suck ass. And like as OSU fans, we kind of know that's like a big part of why we suck at passing. Although there's definitely, credible debate as far as like whether we should make a quarterback change or not. But I think that, as far as like the box score goes, though, and getting back to my point, is that South Florida, if you look at the box score against Temple, it's like, man, they look how much they beat them by. They ran all over them.
They covered the spread easily.
But
and I think a lot of sharps were on
South Florida.
They were on
South Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Because I told Steele that because he was on Temple, and I right away was like, yeah, sharps on South Florida. He's like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah. So
but yeah, South Florida, we were texting last night all about it. Like that game was a joke. Like both teams. South Florida's not a bad team. Temple's a really bad team.
Temple's bad. Man, they're bad. Maybe that's how how Braum took over Purdue and coaching makes all the difference in the world. Look at Matt Rule leaving Temple. Maybe that's a big part of it, because it's still it's his kids that he recruited. It's the same kids, but I don't know who's coaching Temple now. I mean, whoever you are, you're doing a bad job. But
the reason we don't really like the Bulls, well, one, Charlie Strong, we don't think he's a good coach.
He's bad.
Two, they get a lot of penalties. They just
discipline.
If they're playing a good team. The last 2 weeks they've played Illinois and Temple, and they've both been like maybe the worst two football games I've watched this year.
Easily.
Like so many penalties by both teams, just like shitty turnovers that completely swing the game. They're getting a lot of turnover luck so far. And just incompetence by the other teams. Temple had 86 yards in this game and 6 turnovers.
That's really bad.
Yeah. So, this is a team. If they keep doing stupid things like the penalties, and then they're not getting those turnovers that they've been getting, you can see them, coming back down to earth, because people are going to look at the scores and see how much they're winning by and think, this is a really good team, when maybe, they're not really disciplined, as much as like they should be.
Yeah. I agree with that. So I think unless you have another game you want to talk about, we can move on to our bets. So
let's just do
we keep talking about our betting record. As a podcast overall, now the podcast consists of, you guys are watching for the first time, which there's 8 people that watch. Maybe one day we'll be up to 20 and then 50, who knows. But the podcast consists of Addison and myself, Steele, and then Corey from Denver. So it's 4 of us making picks each week. We don't all pick the same games. There are some that we do have the same picks, so some of these overlap. That goes with wins and losses, though. So the record is not exactly fudged or anything. But we're 42-18 against the spread and with over-unders to start the year. That's 70%. That's incredible. I mean, that's probably not sustainable, but it kind of shows that we do kind of know football, and I guess put in I want to call it research, but it's an interest. And so when something's an interest, then it's a passion, and then you put more time into it, and then you know more about it. So
we spend a lot of time during the weeks talking about games. So.
And by weeks, we mean 52 weeks a year.
And so we've got a great record, and each one of us individually has been a winner every week so far.
Yeah.
So we've been really consistent, and now should we give Corey's picks and kind of comment on them?
Is he not able? We can get him on the phone.
Yeah,
see if you can get him on the phone.
Yeah. Well, where's my phone?
And
I'm looking at it.
I hear.
Yeah, call him.
I can ask him. Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead with your. You can. How about this?
I'll
Give all your picks, and then we'll do what we did last time, where maybe give if you have like a most confident bet or two, and give your more of like an in-depth analysis why. But if not, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I'll try to get
Okay.
forward
Yeah.
here.
All right. I got Mississippi State plus 6.5. That was the best number I saw. I took them last week. After that performance, I'm riding with them again. Like I said, one more week. The number is down to 5. I'd probably still take that, but I like that I got 6.5 out of it. It'd be nice if I got that 7, but I didn't ever see it.
Don't we all wish we had that key number?
I didn't see it ever offered at 7, so
could have popped a half point.
Yeah.
I did that for a couple games this week.
I got Maryland -4. I don't know. I just think it's an improved team. I kind of don't like going up against Scott Frost because we talked about him earlier. But
maybe the Nebraska savior.
But whatever. Maryland -4. Kind of a gut thing that hasn't let me down yet so far.
Yeah, right.
I got Baylor plus 28.
I have that one as well.
Yeah. Virginia Tech, Old Dominion, over 52. Washington, Colorado, over 50. Utah, Arizona, later tonight, over 61. This one was at 61.
I like that bet.
Went down to like 57 and then went back up to like.
Yeah.
So it's had movement both ways.
I should have looked at one.
Utah plays a little more, or I haven't seen Utah play yet this year, but their offense is supposed to be more pass oriented.
That's
so
what
hopefully it translates into more points.
That helps the over. Clock stops. Yeah.
UCLA Stanford over 62. This is one where we didn't get the best number on, but
I did, but I also have it over 62.
Oh yeah, I actually have both, but I actually have both also.
We're really hoping for points in that game.
This one went down to 57 also. So you and I both think we've seen UCLA's D play a few times and they are bad, especially against the run. Stanford's good at running the football, especially Stanford's had a lot of big plays in the running game. I think they're going to run all over UCLA. They can do whatever they want.
They can literally do whatever they want.
I mean, Stanford's not a great passing team, but
they're going to be.
I don't think it matters against UCLA.
It doesn't matter.
I also think Rosen's going to get his points, and he's always good for a late flurry of points if they're losing anyway. So I like that over.
Yeah.
The game the game I saved for last here that I guess is my lock of the week is Florida -2.5 against Kentucky. Florida is a team that a lot of people, they haven't looked great so far this year. But one thing you can say for them is they haven't played cupcakes. They played Michigan and Tennessee. Offensively they haven't been good. Just like ever since they lost Urban, really.
I thought they looked a little bit better last week. I thought Franks looked a little bit more calm.
But they still had like 6 points going into the fourth quarter.
But
and they won on a Hail Mary. So we just got to take a second to laugh at Tennessee. Again, very Tennessee way to lose.
Yeah. Okay, 2 things that we need to laugh at. One, when this podcast used to be on the Arch City Poker YouTube channel, if you guys ever want to see our podcast from the year before, which we used to be a little more rambunctious, maybe a little more drunk in some of those.
More drunk.
Maybe, I may have called Penn State coach James Franklin a word for like women's private parts, so like a bad word maybe. So we stopped kind of doing that a little bit, but the point is, no, we can still say pussy. But the point is that I had like a Tennessee basketball, and we would just make fun of Tennessee every single podcast because it's one of those programs again that thinks they're supposed to be really good, and they haven't really been nationally relevant for a long time now.
Nah, they pretty much suck for a while.
Yeah, like they do suck, and so that was kind of funny how they lost to Florida, and they always lose to Florida. The second thing that we should mention just really quick before we get back into the picks, how the fuck do teams not defend against Hail Marys?
Yeah, we need to talk about this.
That was a joke. Like, what are coaches doing? Do you not defend against this in practice ever, like at all? And like, how do I just it doesn't make sense to me. Like when we were kids, a Hail Mary was like, oh, it's cool, a Hail Mary, but we always knew it was never going to be caught.
A Hail Mary used to be something that the only one ever completed was Doug Flutie.
The term Hail Mary means like literally like once in your life type of thing. Like
yeah,
you
and
need
now
help from like a higher being or something. But
like either at the end of the like the first half or the end of the game, I swear there's like 2 a week, and Aaron Rodgers throws one like every week.
Yeah, and like there's analysts that actually claim that he is a skilled Hail Mary thrower.
Yeah, which is stupid.
Well, I heard for like because he had the few Hail Marys, and then they finally somebody started questioning.
I mean, he can throw the ball really far.
Right. So, well, somebody started questioning Trent Dilfer or something, and they're like, okay, but what makes him more successful at the next guy? And they go, well, he leaves the ball up in the air longer. And I was like, that's still, you could argue that that gives the DBs more time to get in position. And there's more DBs than there are receivers. There always will be. You can only have so many men down the field in offense. I don't understand how, I'm starting to think, honestly, that if we took over like a football team, like maybe a high school football team, we should just throw Hail Marys every play because apparently nobody defends against them and nobody teaches.
We've seen some pretty bad defense on Hail Marys.
So like I don't know if kids are like afraid of getting like PI called on them. That's better than giving up the game-winning touchdown and like potentially ruining your season. So I mean, because then they're gonna have to throw another Hail Mary most likely. Like it's not gonna be completed again. So I don't know. Maybe with the defense, maybe it will be. But
yeah, good point in talking about the Hail Marys because it's been ridiculous.
All right, so we're gonna give Corey's picks before we get into mine.
I gotta finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A note on Florida.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, sorry.
Florida. A lot of people think they've beaten Kentucky 30 years in a row. Like I have never in my lifetime witnessed a Florida loss against Kentucky, and all they have to do is win by a field goal. Until I see Florida lose to Kentucky in football, I'm just going to assume it's not possible. I know a lot of people think this is finally the year Kentucky beats them. And they probably said that a few times the past few years too, but I'm just not going to believe it until I see it.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think Florida's going to beat them by more than 3. I just think that sometimes when you just have a team's number like that, eventually Kentucky will beat Florida one day, but that one day is not going to be tomorrow. And it's obviously Friday during this podcast. So, Kentucky's a solid team. I think it'll be competitive, but
Virginia just took the lead.
Oh, there we go. Carruthers.
Whoever's got Carruthers tonight is looking pretty good.
I wanted to take that at 14, but it was at 13. I was like, I just feel like there's a lot of value even at anywhere above 10. Maybe I should have. Anyway.
And for any noobs out there, that extra like half point, if you're looking at 13.5 compared to 14, that makes a huge difference.
Makes a big difference in the long run for sure.
Yeah, because you're looking at 2 full touchdowns there at that point.
All right, so let's give Corey's picks and then we'll get into mine.
Are we just gonna list his picks?
Corey literally
is he calling?
No, he's not calling. He's going to dinner. He wanted me to say these 2 things. One, he said Penn State will win by 100 against Iowa. He said Iowa sucks. I think that this is an interesting game. Penn State definitely has more talent than Iowa. The last 3 times that Iowa's played a top 5 team in a nighttime primetime game, they're 3-0. They've won a game outright.
One time against Penn State.
Yeah.
Michigan last year.
Right. So.
And Michigan State a few years ago.
I don't know what it is, but somehow Ferentz gets those guys ready to play. I think
he's good for that one game every 5 years.
This is what makes me think that Iowa is actually going to cover. I don't know, actually. I don't know. I'm not going to make a pick, but what I will say is that Iowa runs the ball. This is where I struggle with picking Iowa, and actually it might be – I actually think I'm actually leaning Penn State if I had to pick, and this is not one of my picks. The reason for this is that Iowa's defense doesn't seem to be as good as they traditionally are. They gave up 48 points to Iowa State. I know that's overtime and stuff, but Penn State is a whole different animal on offense than Iowa State. And Iowa will run the ball. That means the clock's going to be winding. That means that they could probably stay in the game longer. It's nighttime. Kinnick is a tough place to play. I don't know. This is going to be an interesting game. It's actually Penn State's first test of the year. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Yeah, they got a lot of the same players from last year that handled a bunch of tests, but it's a new year, and you got some new players in the roster and stuff and in key positions. So
the number is 12, by the way. So Corey's got Penn State minus 12.
Okay, so he does have him at 12. He also said his lock of the week. We don't have to give all. Well, I don't know. Do you want to give all his picks and just talk about them real quick, or?
Yeah, well,
just run down his picks.
What was the other comment he had?
His lock of the week is the Texas San Antonio Texas State under.
I don't know a lot about this one, so
I don't think Corey does either, but maybe he's like, it's probably a metrics thing. He's like a metrics guy. He probably saw some stats about how the metrics have this game at like 32 or something. So
I think UTSA is an under team a lot.
Okay, and they're both probably not very good on offense.
So that's under 45. Corey has given that as his lock of the week.
Okay. So
he's also Corey has mentioned he likes unders in SEC games a lot, and he's got Mississippi State, Georgia under 49. He's got Virginia Tech, Old Dominion over 52.5, just like myself. Over in the TCU Oklahoma State game at 72. Under Notre Dame, Sparty, that's 54. NC State, Florida State, under 51.5. We talked about that earlier. He's with us on Baylor as well with the plus 28. He's got Oklahoma State covering the 12.5 against TCU. Virginia Tech covering 26.5 against Old Dominion. That's a game where Old Dominion is playing some
backup quarterback.
Yeah, he's
against
like 17
against
or
a
18
Bud
or something.
Foster, really complex blitzing scheme. Like that's, we'll talk about that more in a minute.
Yeah,
go ahead.
And he's also got West Virginia minus 21 against Kansas. That's
public money's definitely on Virginia Tech and West Virginia, but I think for good reason. I actually have both of those. Actually, can I see your phone because I don't remember my picks?
Yeah.
So
also, Steele, you were lazy and didn't get your picks down in the doc, so we're not going to mention them.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Steele is expecting a baby very soon, but I think pick should be the priority. Like, I'm not saying like he shouldn't be like a good expecting father, but this is more important as far as the pod goes. So he kind of blew it. But all right, so I'm just gonna run down my picks real quick, and then I'll give you guys my lock, and then we can have some closing thoughts or whatever. I have Ohio Bobcats OU +3 against somebody. I really don't remember who they're playing. I think I probably should have that down somewhere, but we'll get to that in a second. You can find it. I do have West Virginia minus 21 against Kansas. Kansas is god awful. They gave up like 40-something points.
Michigan.
Okay, yeah, I'll get to that. Kansas just gave up like almost 50 points to OU, to the Bobcats. So West Virginia, Will Grier, they've been putting up a lot of offense to start the year. I think they're good enough on defense to contain Kansas to where they win this game by 4 touchdowns or so. So I think that's why the public just thinks Kansas sucks, and they do. So that's why they're picking West Virginia. But I see enough there to where I don't think Kansas keeps it close enough. NC State +11, we already talked about that. I kind of got not the best number, but I think there's still value in them there. I think at 10 it's good, so I think 11's fine, obviously. Toledo +14. This is an interesting one. They play down in Coral Gables at Miami, and Miami, just like Florida State, has only played 1 game so far this year because of the Hurricanes. And pun not intended there, but I think that Toledo's a solid team. They are very possibly the best team in the MAC. So what the hell is going on? Oh, I think the roommate's home. I thought my cat was literally like shutting doors and stuff. So yeah, Toledo, that's gonna be an interesting matchup. They could very well be the best team in the MAC. They're a solid football team. I think that they're gonna give Miami actually a pretty competitive game, so I like them. Wake, I have at -4 against App State. I like this one a lot. It's one of my my favorite picks of the week. Wake's looks very improved from the last few years. They seem to be very well coached. I think that there's, even though it is Wake, I think there's a little bit of a talent discrepancy with App State. And App State, people love Appalachian State because they beat Michigan like 10 years ago. I mean, we love them for that reason.
Yeah.
But and I'm not saying they're not like a decent team or anything, but when I looked at like some stuff like Wake in the last 9 games is 7-2 against the spread. I think App State's like 1-6. So I think it's more of like a numbers game, and I like how Wake's playing. I saw some sharps, like pro bettors or whatever on Wake, so I like that. Virginia Tech -28. This is probably my lock of the week. The more I think about it, I probably could argue maybe like UCLA Stanford over 57, but I think that when you have a Bud Foster complex like blitzing scheme against like a 17-year-old quarterback for Old Dominion, and you have a Virginia Tech team that is coming off a game where it was a little slow for them on offense, but then they really started to find their stride. I think there's a lot of confidence there. I think they're going to absolutely murder Old Dominion. I think this might be like a 40-point win. So
apparently, we definitely should have taken Virginia.
Yeah.
They just scored again.
Yeah, Boise State's not as good as they traditionally are.
Yeah, and they've been bad on the Smurf turf.
Yeah.
This year and last year against the spread.
I thought, wasn't there a rule against teams wearing the same color jersey as the turf color? Even though, like,
they can't wear all blue.
Okay, so like their helmets are orange, so that like whatever, that's stupid. So anyway, let's get back to the picture. Yeah, so we talked about UCLA, Stanford. I have them at 2 numbers. Like, I got them at 62 originally. I thought that was really low. Then all of a sudden it got bet down to 57. So I don't know if there's some sharps or some metrics that are saying this game's going to be.
I still feel good about it.
I feel good at 62, so I don't really care. I mean, maybe that makes us noobs. We'll see. I mean, if they score more than 62, I'm going to win both bets. So TCU, Oklahoma State, I mentioned earlier, I have that over at 71. Nothing to talk about. Big 12 offenses, Big 12 defenses. NC State, Florida State under 51. Talked about that already. James Blackman, new quarterback for Florida State. Very good defenses for both schools. I think both teams like to run the ball a good amount too, so I think that'll definitely help. Baylor plus 28. This is an interesting one where, like, for guys that are novice bettors or don't really know about how like lines being set and how they work. Yeah, Baylor's definitely not very good this year, but
0-3. I mean,
they looked pretty competitive last week against somebody decent.
You mean Corey all have Baylor?
And 86% of the money being bet is on Oklahoma. That's way too weighted towards like Vegas winning. I feel like there's too much public money going in on Oklahoma. Look, guys, Oklahoma's definitely a lot better than Baylor, and it might be a sweat at the end for sure.
28's a lot of points.
28 is a lot of points at home, and Baylor still has some talented kids in that program, no matter how bad things are there right now because of Art Ross. But they do have Matt Rule, who we just said maybe that's why Temple sucks, and he's at Baylor maybe making a change. So I don't know. I think it's a lot of points. It's more of like a numbers bet. I think 4 touchdowns for a team that's
4 touchdowns.
It's not like they have the talent of like Old Dominion. It's not like that. So my last 2, the more that I look at them, the more I don't know. I feel decently confident in these. I have USC minus 16.5 at Cal. It is the first kind of like test for USC. I haven't really thought that this is one of those ones where like Cal has beat North Carolina and Ole Miss. Those are 2 like schools that people think of like, oh, those are like decent football programs. But I didn't really love how Cal looked against Ole Miss. I just thought both teams looked bad. USC didn't look good against Texas, as Addison already mentioned, but I think it's more of like a matchup game. Cal has really bad defensive backs, and I think USC might burn them quite a few times through the air. I think that it could be a sweat, but I think USC has the potential to run Cal out of their own building. So that's one that I have. The last one that I got is also kind of like a numbers thing. The Notre Dame-Michigan State line was at like 4.5 and 4 for a week. I saw it for about 15 seconds at 3, and I got Notre Dame at 3. Michigan State is a team that the last like decade, I guess, under D'Antonio have been really solid. They are well coached. They play tough usually in big games. I don't really think of East Lansing as like a really tough place to play. Notre Dame, I don't think they've looked great this year, but I think that there is more talent and depth there than there is at Michigan State. If I think they're going to win the game, I think they're going to win by more than 3, or at least by 3. So it's just kind of like one of those numbers thing. I like them as the better team in a road environment that I don't – you might disagree with that, but I don't see Michigan State as like a really tough road environment. So I'm going to go with Notre Dame. That's probably, to be honest, my least confident one. That might have just been me late at night just pressing the button because I wanted to, but
down to 3 is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're the better team.
It was at 5 earlier in the week.
Yeah. So I don't know, but yeah, I would say for my lock of the week, I like Virginia Tech to smoke Old Dominion. Yeah, like Addison said too, we don't have any picks for steals, so
I have the over in that Vatech game also.
Okay.
I just want to point. I think that Vatech could hit the over by themselves. Yeah. So anything that Old Dominion gets would be bonus. Yeah. Hopefully that Bud defense gets some points for him too against the young quarterback.
49-10
No,
maybe?
it's 52. Yeah, it's crazy.
49-10 like easily. So
they just put up 64 against ECU.
Yeah, so I think I don't know, is there anything else you want to talk about? I think that's probably wraps it up. Yeah, so we'll see if our bets come through this week. Maybe if we keep smashing, maybe we'll get some followers and you guys can make some of your bets.
We should have talked about Michigan Purdue.
We can talk about it just for like a quick 5 minute here.
I mean, I think it's an interesting game just to see another test for Purdue.
I'm interested to see Purdue's offense against like a legitimate defense.
That, and also on the flip side, so Michigan, they've been really good defensively this year. We all knew about all the starters they lost going into the year. Mm-hmm. They played really well, but the secondary hasn't been tested yet. The D-line's been lights out, and the linebackers have been really good too. The secondary has played Florida, who we've talked about has been shit offensively. They played Air Force, who doesn't even throw the ball, and they played Cincy.
Yeah, bad teams, bad offensive teams.
We'll see where the secondary for Michigan is at right now.
These guys.
And Michigan's been bad offensively. They have 1 touchdown in 10 red zone trips this year.
I heard that today. It's terrible.
If Purdue can get early points, I mean,
they can make it tough.
Yeah.
Look, this is the
Michigan can't keep up with a team that scores a lot of points, I think.
So. Right. We talk about like Braum coming in, like coaches making a big difference. And I mean, if you have, it's amazing what confidence can do. And yeah, Purdue on paper doesn't have close to the talent and depth that Michigan has. But Ross-Ade Stadium is like it's like a weird place for a lot of teams to go. What time is that game?
4.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's the Big Ten Network's previewed game of the week, I think. So Purdue, they've got a lot of hype there. Michigan is still favored by 10, I believe, which I think that's Vegas kind of saying like, hey guys, let's temper the expectations on Purdue a little bit. But
still, the fact that that's 10. I mean, think about
where it was last year.
Yeah,
could have been like 30.
Yeah, really.
Who knows? Like it honestly could have been like
it probably could have been 21. Yeah, the fact that that game is 10 right now is kind of crazy.
Yeah, so Purdue's look good. I think that we're gonna find out about them tomorrow. I mean, if Purdue wins that game, are we talking about Purdue potentially being a Big West possible contender?
We could,
and that means that they're a Big Ten contender. Then, would you ever have thought that before the year? Purdue was supposed to be one of the worst teams in all of Power 5 FBS,
and not even that, but like even
that.
all of football, right?
Like could lose to like Illinois and Rutgers. Yeah. And I'm not saying they still maybe couldn't, but right now the way things look, they're gonna smoke those 2 teams. So, that's an interesting game. I honestly couldn't bet it either way because I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is the week that Michigan scores in the red zone. I don't know if Purdue is. Maybe they've look good against teams that aren't as good as we thought. Like maybe Louisville's just not that good. And so I don't know though. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for the week 4 podcast here. Check us out next week when we'll be back for week 5. And, good luck with your bets. Good luck with your teams. The NFL sucks, so keep watching college football. Well, it doesn't suck, but it's... Yeah, and comment on who you guys like too. Yeah, comment. Games. You guys can say whatever you disagree with. If you troll or heckle, I don't really give a fuck. But you can say who you like, what teams you think are your playoff teams right now, your surprise teams. We're Ohio State fans, so you can bash OSU all you want, but we're always going to be amazing. So yeah, that'll do it till next week. Yeah, let's go get some food. Yeah, I want to get food.